Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Kiana Canada. Welcome to Kiana's Show. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to try and be very concise with this video because I have an appointment that I need to attend to. And so what we're going to be talking about is plagiarism. Plagiarism is a very sticky topic, especially if you have not gone to university or college. And so what is plagiarism? It is the act of knowingly using another person's work and passing it off as your own. We have witnessed within the recent news cycle and within the past few years of certain academics coming up and being ousted from the university or being compelled and called to resign because of allegations that they plagiarized another person's bibliography. And so I want to have a brief discussion about plagiarism and why the topic is very nuanced and how you can avoid it. So I want to start by saying when I was a young person in my 20s, I think even younger than that, I think I was probably like, a teenager, but just coming upon my 20s, I wrote this poem. And I shared this poem with this guy that I really liked, and it was funny because I think he liked the poem, he took on to it. And I wasn't like this great poet, this person who was writing poems all the time. I just, happened to write this poem that he really, really did like. And what he did was he shared the poem with his friends and he was like reciting it, but not giving credit to say that I had written the poem. And so he was passing it off as his own work. And that is an example of plagiarism. So it's like you're knowingly using another person's work and you're passing it off as your own. Another example of plagiarism, which is possibly not knowingly, is where YouTubers will read an article or a snippet of an article in their YouTube videos, and then they don't actually cite that journalist's work in the description of their, for example, video. I recently watched a debate between Candace Owens and Andrew Wilson, and Andrew Wilson cited some work from Brandy Zarosny, and he did not give credit to Brandy within that debate. So that is an example of, probably plagiarism, but unknowingly plagiarizing someone else's work. Another example of unknowingly plagiarizing someone's work is, before I went to university, I wrote my book, Running from Empty Shoes, and you can read that book that is out there, and that book can show you a person who was not a skilled, like I was coming upon being a writer, but I didn't know enough about writing or, adding a bibliography to a book. The book is self-published. And so that is like another example of, content within a book that is unknowingly plagiarized, right? Another example of that could be considered plagiarism. And so I just gave you an example of my book, Running from Empty Shoes. That's kind of like sloppiness, where you're not providing the correct citations to work that has been cited, or if you do provide the correct citations, like you're not actually, you didn't list a bibliography like in a piece of work, such as a memoir, a book, or a journal piece, or an article, etc. And then we need to get to self-plagiarism. A lot of people don't know that they can actually plagiarize their own work. So let's say, for instance, you're in a university and you have pieces of work that you have written, and sometimes you're writing just off of the cuff and you don't cite your own work. that can be considered self-plagiarism, not citing your own work. Not citing your own work. And so I want to talk about Turnitin, because Turnitin is usually like the system that universities use to determine whether or not a piece of work could be considered plagiarism. And this is another sticky point about plagiarism, is where, let's say, for instance, you upload something to Turnitin, and then that piece of work is uploaded there, and then so for example, you upload it as a draft, and then you decide to upload the final. That could be considered plagiarism, right? And Turnitin, it really doesn't make a determination that this piece of work is plagiarized. What it essentially does is it looks for comparisons, and I think in certain instances it will look for a comparison with regards to bibliographies to see if bibliographies are the same as another bibliography. And when you're in a university and you are trying to really build yourself up as an academic or a researcher, or just trying to get a degree, I think it is important to be careful about citing your work and making sure that your bibliography is accurate and that you've done your own work. Now, we are living in the digital age where you can be attacked for your views. So if you are writing about a specific topic or a subject, it's not unheard of for cyber hackers to remove your bibliography, replace that. I'm not saying that happened in the cases that are being discussed in the media, but it's not outside the realm of possibility where cyber hackers are hacking into your account or changing your work. That could happen. It's something that happened to me when I was at Queen's University, Belfast. I wrote a assignment, and hackers hacked into the system and deleted 500 words from my assignment. So these are things that we do need to be cognizant of, because it is quite unfortunate that there's not enough security with regards to these systems in university where persons can hack into them and alter a person's work. And to reiterate, I'm not saying that happened in the most recent case. We really don't know what happened because the person is not here to tell us what happened, right? And I think that that's quite unfortunate. But it's important to know when to reference and when not to reference. So when to reference is when you are directly quoting another person's work. So if someone said, let's say for instance, an injustice everywhere, the quote from Martin Luther King, or so if you're quoting MLK, or you're quoting another civil rights activist, or you're quoting an author or an academic, and you see that they have said something, you have to cite that source, a direct quotation. So if you read my work and I say, I love cakes because they're so delicious, because they contain Madagascar vanilla and I don't know, special kind of chocolate, and you see that is a direct quote from a piece of work that I have, and you want to use that, then you need to cite that source. So direct quotes, and then statistics. You need to cite sources when you are using statistics. It's quite, there is some debate regards to common knowledge and whether or not you need to quote anything that is common knowledge. And many scholars have argued that if it's common knowledge, then you don't need to quote it or cite it. And then some scholars have argued in the reverse. But common knowledge is if it's found in like quantity, if you can see it everywhere. So for example, the United States is in North America. That is something that probably does not need to be cited because that is common knowledge. It's you can find that everywhere, and so that would not need to be you wouldn't need to cite that in your bibliography. Ubiquity, so known by many. So that's another thing. Many people know that the United States is in North America, so that would not need to be something that you would need to cite in your bibliography. And I think it's important to say, well, how can you avoid plagiarism? How can you avoid this? Well, you can incorporate another person's work into your own work by summarizing what they have stated, paraphrasing what they have stated, and then, of course, giving direct quotations. But I want to reiterate that there is inadvertent plagiarism that happens in university all the time. Like if you have first started out in universities, especially if you're in your undergraduate, I know many of us within university because say, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to cite that, or, that's when you're learning, of course, about plagiarism in your undergrad. But I think it's quite unfortunate if the allegations are true, if a person has just maybe downloaded a person's bibliography and used that as their own work. On the flip side, I don't think it was a responsible action for there to be a swarming of the media to come down on specific academics, and essentially what happened, as we know, drove them to their demise. So I'm 100% against both of those things. And I think another way to avoid plagiarism is to just write about a topic that you enjoy. Write about a topic that you know a lot about. And I think that would help a person to avoid plagiarizing another person's work. Because if you write about a topic that you really enjoy, or if you write a topic that you're very interested in, or you write about a topic that you know a lot about, then when you're researching, you are going to want to look for sources about this specific topic. I mean, if you have ever been in university, like I have, one of the things that I love to do is I love to search for information, especially going into books and then reading an article and then going to the bibliography and seeing, oh, this author cited this source, and then going to that source and then reading that, and then, being just, excited about that activity and that experience of being able to read a person's work and then citing that person's work in a piece that I have written. So I think that's the number one way that you avoid plagiarism, is to write about a topic that you know a lot about. Write about a topic that you want to know a lot about. Write about a topic that interests you. And then use lived experience. If none of those topics, like for example, if there's not a topic that you found that you have found of interest, if there's not a topic that just moves you, then consider lived experience. Do autoethnography, an autoethnographic account of some area of your life, right? And I think when you do that, that really helps. It helps you to avoid plagiarizing another person's work, because when you're at the master's level or at the PhD level, these are two levels that you are really building yourself up as you're mastering a specific area in academia, or you are becoming a doctor in a specific area, and it should be something that you are so interested about. It should be something that you would want to sit hours in the university researching. It should be a topic that when you go to sleep at night, sometimes you don't get that topic off your mind. And when you wake up in the morning, you're like, okay, I want to go to the university and I want to read more about this, or I want to read more articles about this. That's how your dissertation should be, and your postgraduate dissertation, so your doctorate dissertation should be as well. Now, I didn't get to write my dissertation because I was seeking to write my dissertation on a very controversial state crime that has not been discussed enough with regards to the global north perpetrating it. But if I had the opportunity to write my dissertation, of course, I would love the opportunity to, go to the library, and like I did when I was at Queen's University, like I gathered all of my sources, and I gathered all these articles on my topic and kept a portfolio of them, wrote down notes. And that's another thing, a way to track, to legitimize your work, is knowing the dates in which you downloaded the work. So articles that you're going to cite in your dissertation and in your bibliography, knowing the dates, writing the notes, so that, for example, if you're ever accused of something like that, then you can say, well, no, this date is when I downloaded this work, these articles, these are all the notes that I have written on this. There's no way that could have happened. But what's unfortunate is that some people do plagiarize other people's bibliographies. Sometimes that does happen. So it's quite unfortunate, but to reiterate, it does happen. What else did I want to say on this topic before I leave? Yeah, so another thing that I want to say is that when I was in Queen's University, Belfast, there were some manipulative people that were trying to get me to upload my bibliography to, so this was right around the time where I had just learned that they were trying to stop my dissertation on transnational repression, and I had the feeling that they were going to try and put me out of the university. This was like right around the time when we all had, where break came, and then when break came, there was like the indications that the intelligence officers and these intelligence firms that were involved in my victimization had swooped in and was essentially getting me ousted from the university. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I had some very manipulative people come to me and say, well, just upload your bibliography to turn it in, and that way it'll appear as if like you were starting your work, and perhaps they'll let you start to write your dissertation. And I was like, well, no, because if I upload my bibliography to, and so bibliography, for if you're not, if you haven't been to university, it's all of the sources that you cite from, of course, like you have your dissertation. So anything that you cite within your dissertation, you have a bibliography. So the bibliography contains the names of journal articles, books, videos, etc. Right? And so they were saying for me to upload my bibliography to turn it in, and I was like, no, because if I do that, then when I go to try and write my dissertation in the future, that's going to come up as somebody else's work, even though, of course, turn it in has your name on it. It shows that you turned that in. But in this day and time, anything could be altered, anything could be changed. So to close this, I would argue for you to write about something that you care about. Write about something that you're very interested in. And write about something that you want to know. That way there's no need to plagiarize any person's work. And that's the advice that I have on this specific topic. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I gotta go. I think I'm probably running late. Perhaps we'll talk about this later. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.